from the Mac of All Trades studio in Fairport. And driven by Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, it's Billified, the Bill Moran Podcast.
Welcome. Thanks for getting your pod on. Thanks for telling a friend. That's how we spread the word about the pirate ship. Tonight, a little different. We've got some people with some credentials in the studio today. Sergeant Michael Zamira from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department and Dr. Mark Gestring from URMC, who is a trauma surgeon, and they're here to talk about the Consortium for Safe Communities, which the doc and I were talking before you came in, Sergeant, and I said, I didn't do a whole lot because I wanted to have real reaction and learn about this as we were going along. But what I read, I said, it just sort of makes sense. And he said, you would think.
Thank you.
You would think.
We think so, too.
Yes, I understand. But where does the idea, this sounds to me like it would be a great thing for the entire state. I don't believe that the greater Rochester community is the only one that is seeing this uptick. I mean, we see it around the country. We see major metropolitan areas and others that are having similar problems to these things. But the Consortium for the Safe Community, in terms of just even trying to change the laws and things, it feels like, at least in New York State, it's like pulling a piano up the side of a building, or maybe trying to find a bullet in the abdomen. I don't know, Doc. I mean, maybe that's the case. I'm not really sure. Where does the idea come from? The first, let's start there.
Yeah. So thank you, by the way, for having the doctor and I in to talk about this issue. We feel very strongly about it, the both of us, and we're very excited to use your bully pulpit here to talk about it. So. The Consortium for Safe Communities began, I think it was October of 22, was the first meeting of this wide-ranging group of stakeholders from around the community. And really, my boss, Sheriff Baxter, he was coming to me every day saying, I have this message from this person. I have I visited with a grieving mother last night. There's all these people from around our community who just have had enough, that they can't believe that the state of public safety in their communities has gotten to the level it has gotten, and obviously not in a good way. So, we're not just going to sit there and put these people on the back burner. But what we found very quickly was there were many people from around our community that felt the same way.
Right.
They all had leadership roles in the community. They had people that were crying on their shoulders. But what can they do about it? And that was the big question. What can we do? So we convened a small group, I don't know, 15 or so people, and put it out to the group. What can we do? So that group has grown exponentially since then, but really the impetus behind it was, what do we think the problem is? And everybody in the room, which by the way was an extremely diverse group, and not diverse in the sense of sex and race and religion and things of that nature, but really just diverse in the sense that they represent every sort of person you could think of in the Rochester area community. I've got a very educated, highly skilled MD sitting across from me. He was one of the original members. Cheryl Robinson from the North Winton Village Association is there. So we have this hence consortium of people who all have the same interest in. We're not interested in arguing. We're about arriving at a solution.
It's the mastermind group. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's usually what it's called when we go through and try to do things. You go back to even like the founding of this country. It was a mastermind group of trying to figure out how do we solve the problem or the common goal that we want.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is, what it became. And what the group decided is, first and foremost, this is not a problem that's going to be solved by arresting people, by cops alone. It's a grassroots, it's a community effort. And when we really drilled down to it and we tried to arrive at what the solution is, there's many solutions, but what this group concentrated on is initially two things. We need to be able to detain people who are dangerous.
Yes.
And we need to be able to detain people who just refuse to commit or stop committing that cycle of criminality. So we call them the repeat offenders. So that was the impetus, the initial goal of the group, is to sort of advocate for legislation that would allow judges to do those two things. And there's ways to do them fair and objective. There's 49 other states in this country that hold people based upon the risk they present to public safety. We are the only one that does not have that legislation.
So the risk to public safety would be much like we label sex offenders, correct? Like you level one. What is your risk, and where do we hold you? Is that
so, Bill? I don't want to accuse you of doing anything, but I think you might have done some homework, because that's exactly.
I told you I read the one page.
Yeah. So that's exactly what
I
you're
said.
saying.
I wanted to learn as we went along about the this,
Yeah.
but yes.
So I think so that's exactly it. When a sex offender goes to court to be sentenced, they go there with what's called a SORA score. And forgive me, I forget the acronym. But they're assigned a risk based upon a measurable, unbiased risk assessment tool that says this person is a level 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then, the sentence is carried out in accordance with that in mind. And we're saying that tool exists for measuring a person's dangerousness. I know of one created by the Laura and John Arnold Foundation that's widely used throughout the state, and that's just one of them.
Yeah.
So these things exist. We don't have to build it out. There are other states, and not to mention our federal government in D.C. that use those things.
Why does New York State not use it?
Yeah, there's a lot of representatives that just that feel very strongly against that.
Okay.
And I'm unclear as to why they think that. I know that there's been arguments surrounding inequalities and unfairness when you carry those things out, that they can tend to be biased. But
well, I thought early on, I remember talking to Mayor Evans in the city of Rochester about some of these laws, that they were more, the bail reform law was more meant for somebody who, let's say, and he used this analogy, stole a pack of gum, that person wouldn't be locked up necessarily. They would be able to go to work and still pay their bills and meet their obligations. And again, it almost sounds like the assessment that you're talking about. Is this guy a big risk to the community? He swiped a pack of gum or a bottle of soda or whatever. Let's try to show him a better way and let him keep making money and live by societal standards and not by criminal standards. But yet it seems like it's gone much different than that. And I don't know that it's any fault of a judge. I think they're going by the letter of the law.
Yeah,
by which it is, which makes it difficult. So then you need to change the law, which means trying to get the legislatures and all that stuff. And that's the piano up the side of the building part. Yeah, but in the meantime, the communities suffer.
Yeah. So the thing is so it's bail reform is one piece of the pie, and it is a major piece in that pie. But when you look back over the last, I think, 6 years now at this point, there have been 6 major reforms to our justice system that have been pushed down the throughway, that we as a community have been sort of forced to absorb. You talk about bail reform, you talk about raise the age is a huge one. Less is more deals with parole. The HALT Act, which not many people know about, deals with keeping people safe in jails.
Right.
Marijuana reform was a big one. Very good likelihood. Actually, I fully believe it killed Officer Mazurkowitz. The issues that arose out of there with the creation of the gray market. Mm-hmm. So you have all these reforms, and every one of them, I will not dispute, and I know my boss wouldn't either. There was good intentions behind all of them. So you talk about bail reform, about the kid that stole a pack of gum.
Right.
Bail reform, a major push behind came after a young man out of New York City. I think he had stolen a backpack, and he was detained and essentially forgotten about on Rikers Island for a long time, and I think it was months. And he ultimately, he dealt with some mental health issues, and he died in custody. And that was unacceptable for a person to be sitting in Rikers Island, who really shouldn't have been treated in that manner and locked up for that amount of time. So there was reform that was needed to our system. There's no question. I don't think there's a cop on the street that'll argue with that. But the problem that came was that pendulum swung so far the other way. And by the way, there were no law enforcement administrators, advisors, experts that were really
part of this,
part of the conversation. And that's where
it's interesting you use the analogy of the pendulum. I feel like in society, it has swung so far in general, not to get into too much other, but it just seems like it's gone so far in so many aspects of life that when it needs to sort of come back. But how many years have you been in law enforcement?
I think, it's about 19 years. So.
19 years. So, you're almost 2 decades on the job. Things from when you started to now, society, better, worse? Is there more crime? Yeah. So which sounds ridiculous and then maybe hard to quantify. I don't know.
Yeah. So I worked for the first 17 years of my career. I worked in the jail. So not the guy out on the street stopping cars
but you
or
saw
kicking doors in.
People that were.
But they come to us, and we raised some of these people when they were kids in jail. 16-year-old kids. We are responsible for in some cases, and this is not a blanket statement by any means, but I know a lot of people in that jail that I work with that did exactly that, raise these kids, and we develop rapport with these individuals that come in, and you're quote unquote repeat customers. So we deal with them often. And to answer your question, if there's a difference in the way things are 19 years ago versus now, that's an obvious answer. Absolutely. It's black and white almost. And some of that change is good. We're doing a lot more work in jails centered around making people good people again.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work, but we're going to try anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's the right thing to do. But yeah, a big difference in what we're seeing today versus what we're seeing quite a while ago.
Yeah. Doc, when it comes to you, I mean, you've been in Rochester, you said 23 years?
Yeah, so Mike talked about the consortium of the consortium. So basically that's a group that represents many aspects of the community. So I'm a trauma surgeon, so my little slice of life is in the hospital, people who are shot, stabbed, victims of violence, right? So that's my little window into the world, but I sit at the same table with people who are, involved in the faith community, involved in the business community, involved in law enforcement. So each one of us is seeing life from a kind of different perspective. I can tell you, over the 23 years I've been here, I have absolutely seen a shift. There is more violence. There is less accountability for that violence. And the repeat offender stuff, like Mike was talking about, I mean, nobody's after a kid with a piece of gum or a marijuana cigarette.
Right.
But if you're arrested with a gun on Monday, released, arrested with a gun on Tuesday, released, arrested with a gun on Thursday, released, and then shot or shoot somebody on Saturday, it's not a surprise anymore, right? It just seems to me from a common sense perspective, these things are largely preventable. And that's kind of where we get involved. So, as a trauma surgeon, if we see a kid on a bike without a helmet, we're giving him a bike helmet, and this is kind of the bike helmet for the community, if you're running around with an illegal gun, there ought to be some accountability for that. And if you are doing that over and over, that's where the kind of the repeat offender and the dangerousness comes in. You're going to get yourself into big trouble, or you're going to hurt somebody. Yeah, and that's kind of my perspective on this. And and politics aside, I think the number one thing that government should do for us is public safety.
Yeah, and
I'm just getting the sense that I'm not seeing that as the number one focus anymore. I think we're doing a lot of things maybe for a lot of good reasons, but I think good luck finding somebody in one of these neighborhoods that is going to come out and say they feel safer now than they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
You see a lot. You probably, I would assume, go out and talk to family members or friends of whoever the victim is, they're with their heart in their hand and scared. But are we starting to see this kind of behavior? And I can ask you as well, Sergeant, we know in the city of Rochester there have been record numbers of shootings. There's rumors of different things that have gone on. Certainly, it is very, very scary, and you've seen the numbers go up, I think, over the number of years in terms of even murders and but are we starting to see it kind of spill out? Because I've always had this theory that as the city goes, so go the suburbs. Are you starting to see some of this behavior slowly make its way out of the city of Rochester and into more of the community? I mean, you are a Monroe County sheriff, so I would assume you see the entire county.
So what we see, what we're trying to show, and what is happening is that crime in general. I got a graph over here that shows homicides in the city of Rochester. In 2021, there were 85. 2022, there were 75, and last year there were 58.
So we've gone down.
So that's what everybody sees is the downtick on that chart. Yeah. But what we need to remember is that in 2017 there were 28.
Yeah.
In 2018 there were 28.
Right.
We aren't winning right now.
No.
58 is completely unacceptable. I mean, really, one is unacceptable. But let's operate within our reachability right here. 58 is asinine. That's 58 dead bodies. That's 58 grieving families. And it's, we see the occasional homicide outside of the city of Rochester. It's predominantly within the city of Rochester, but what I'm trying to, I guess, articulate here is all of this other crime drives this.
Yeah.
You talk about retail theft, right? I guess to most people, and very reasonably so, they're two completely separate categories.
Well, I will tell you, in my experience, the stolen car issue.
Yeah.
So seeing, 13, 14, 15-year-old drivers of stolen cars hitting things and getting personally injured.
Yeah.
And to your point, hitting things in Brighton, Parenton. And,
yeah, right.
It doesn't take a long, stretch to think that if you're driving a stolen car at, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, you're going to get out of the city of Rochester pretty quickly.
Right.
And now, some poor guy's driving down the street and suddenly a car comes slamming into the side because the 15-year-old who's driving it can't drive a car at 50 miles an hour.
Right.
So, those kinds of things I think you are seeing sneak out into the county from the city. And I can tell you, from my experience over the years, shootings are not unique to Rochester, and we've had shootings ever since I came here, but we have homicides on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:00.
Right, broad daylight.
We have shootouts on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. That's different. That's a level of unabashed criminality that I'm not used to seeing in the city, and that has absolutely shifted over the last maybe 5-7 years.
So for you, Doc, what sort of is the solution there? Years ago, there was somebody who I think has made a bad name for themselves in the city of Rochester over time, but I had gone to college with this person, Adam McFadden. And Adam used to just say to me, he would come on and he would say, we're going to have a real problem because many of the young people today are being raised by their grandparents, and the grandparents are dying off, and there's going to be nobody there, and it's going to kind of just be kids running loose. Now, I don't know if that's sort of what we're seeing now or not, but what would be the solution? It feels like in some way you almost need a parent to step in and go, hey, cut it out. But I mean, that's simplifying it to the easiest, right?
I'm not a law enforcement expert, so
right.
I'll let Mike correct me here, but it seems to me that if you've put your faith in a judge, that judge should be able to determine whether or not somebody coming before them is going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And, and if it's that kid who stole a pack of gum or a backpack or something silly like that, then yeah, you use your discretion. But if you're talking to somebody who is, stolen large quantities of items from a big box store over the last month, over and over and over again, at some point that has to stop. Somebody who's been, when we talk about getting arrested with a gun, somebody has to chase that person.
Yes.
I mean, it's a car chase. It's a foot chase. Those people don't just stop and say, here's my illegal gun, right? So there's a lot of drama that gets you to the point where you now found a suspect with an illegal gun, and we're releasing those people almost immediately. And it just, to me, as a citizen, it makes absolutely no sense. So, not necessarily, like Mike said, against bail reform, but there's got to be some guide rails, some common sense applied to these types of situations. And I'm hearing that those guidances for judges exist and they're not being used. I'm not sure that's the case, because you have to put your faith in the judges, and they're not able to implement these kinds of things for the people who really need. In the words of Sheriff Baxter, a timeout. I think he used that expression, and I think it's really true. We have catalytic converter thefts that were an issue. We have car thefts that were an issue. We have stores that can't possibly continue to sustain the kinds of losses they're sustaining. Those costs are going to go to the next guy who has to pay for that, or the stores are going to leave.
Right.
We're seeing that. You see an extension of that in places like San Francisco, where businesses are just picking up and leaving because they can't possibly tolerate that kind of lawlessness on a regular basis.
Right.
And it's kind of sad that to a certain extent it's happening here. And I think the consortium is made up of a bunch of people who are looking at the exact same problem from a bunch of different views. And Mike made the point to say it's a diverse group. Not everybody agrees about the things we talk about. There's a lot of disagreement, but on these core issues, public safety, common decency, being held accountable for kind of, massive theft, those kinds of things, I think everybody around the table thinks society is going to be a better place when you have that kind of accountability in your cities, in your counties, in your state.
People are, I'm sure, listening, nodding along, saying, I agree. How do they get involved? What is the next step? Who do we need to plead this case to, so to speak?
Yeah. So before I get into what we're doing, what I'll do is plug the website that we have. It's ourconsortiumny.com. consortiumny.com. And it's a very simple website in its infancy stages, but there's a little red button on there that you can click to read our proposal, what we want to see out of state law develop. And it's four very simple issues. We already talked about two of them. Judges having the ability to detain people based upon their risk to public safety, aka a dangerousness standard. Number two is being able to hold the repeat offender. Number three is something, and I was going to chime in here when you guys were talking about this earlier. What we want is clean law. So what you have are, like I said, 6 major reforms to our justice system over 5 years that have occurred. In any sort of mass overhaul like that is not going to occur without confusion. And that's what we're seeing right now. Sometimes, like you had indicated earlier, Bill, judges are just cutting people loose because maybe that's what the law tells them to do.
Right.
Other times they're doing it because judges, lawyers, cops, victims, and suspects, and the list goes on, we're not clear on the law.
I gotcha.
Nobody's clear on the law because...
So you got the gray area, so to speak, right?
Well, you've got... I don't think it offers a lot of gray area, to be honest with you, but it's an unintended gray area.
Gotcha.
This is an unintended consequence of all the reforms that have come down. They've just resulted in a lot of confusion. In some of it's, intentional confusion, if you will. But of a lot of it is just by, you've got just such a massive overhaul to a system that we're used to doing this way. But now we're changing this in 6 months later, we're going to amend that. Bail reform in and of itself, I think off the top of my head, has been amended at least 3 times, not to mention raise the age and a few of the other reforms. So it's difficult to keep up with. So that's the third topic we're asking for in our proposal that you can view on ourconsortiumny.com. We want clean law. Let's distill this down so that it's fair for everybody, including the suspects, including the people we're arresting. If you are doing A, C will happen to you, and B could. That should be made clear. It's only fair to everybody involved in this system. And lastly, this was kind of a late add-on, but it just made sense. Sheriff Baxter stood with several members of the state legislature, Senator Helming and Senator Ort. This proposal for elder parole came out and was just so unbelievable to the group. It was shocking that we had to include this in our proposal. Essentially, what that proposal says is that if a person convicted of a crime has done at least 15 years of their sentence and they are 55 years old, they are automatically eligible for a parole hearing. I looked high and low in that law. The sheriff's counsel looked high and low in that law. The district attorney and her staff looked through that law. We were unable to find anywhere in there that it said, well, except if you did this. So that means guys like Mark Christie that killed Kellyanne Polton, when this law passes, will be eligible for a parole hearing. I'm not saying he's getting out, but he at least gets that hearing.
Right.
So essentially what this law says is there is no longer life without parole in New York State.
Right.
And that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
That is unacceptable. We're not talking about people being held pre-trial.
No.
We're talking about people being convicted of crimes that have gone to serve a sentence. Serve your time.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're almost looking you're looking for fair. Let's have a fair look at the person committing the crime, be able to assess where they are, and then decide the punishment from there. And let's make things fair. That a Mark Christie probably shouldn't be getting. It should be life without parole. That's what you were sentenced to, not at 55 after 15 or 20 years that you've been in. That would happen. I think that. So who does this go to when you make these proposals? Who's the decider of what happens or doesn't happen? And I would assume it has to go to assembly members, state senators, right? These sort of people who then try to bring it and revise the laws or make new laws.
Yeah. So
interesting. Maybe I'll jump in.
Go ahead,
So
Doc.
this is not a new effort. This has been going on now for a little while, and so this has been going on for a little while, and the people it's going to have seen it, have discussed it, have talked about it, and there's been pushback. So for a number of political reasons, which I don't totally understand, and I'm not a politician, I don't want to be a politician, but like I said, that core value of protect the citizen seems to be getting pushed to the side a little bit here for whatever reason. I can't really say that, but these concepts are not new. People are not seeing these proposals for the first time. And I think what we're doing is we're really trying to, expand the number of people who are supporting this. There's efforts downstate as well. I keep seeing, in New York City, people are feeling unsafe. In the 5 boroughs, they're feeling unsafe. That's not part of this consortium, but those voices are becoming more and more organized and more I'm hoping that at some point somebody's going to say we can't continue to, ignore those voices. And I don't know where you were going to go, Mike. I'm sorry I stepped on you there, but
no, not at all.
But the concept that this is some sort of a new initiative. I mean, this, the folks involved have been pushing this initiative, and there's been previous budget proposals, and there's been some high-ranking people talking about this, and it doesn't seem to get any traction. So I think one of the reasons we're trying to be animated about this is this needs a fair hearing, and people with common sense need to start looking at this legitimately.
Let's just take one brief moment, but then I have questions that I'll ask you after 20 years of service, and then you, Doc, who has been seeing people come in for a quarter century to the in terms of what we're seeing in society, and then what is the answer? We talk about grassroots, we talk about all these things, and there's a phrase that gained a lot of traction over the past couple of years that I feel like, I don't know, but I feel like fuels some of what we see today. We'll get to that next, but first. I think that's one of the greatest guitar riffs in rock. I really do. And I asked the doc for his favorite song we would bump with it coming back, and he said this song, and I was a little taken. I was like, wow, all right. But that Mark Knopfler, really underrated, right?
Good stuff.
Yeah, really good stuff. Really good stuff.
It's one of the few things I can listen to with my kids in the car, because otherwise their tastes are completely different, but they like this also.
Yes, I had the same problem with my kids. I was always more I love the Stones, and I like some of the deeper stuff, and always singer-songwriter kind of stuff. So I got my youngest hooked on John Hyatt. We would sing Tennessee Plates when he was a little baby. It was, one of the cleaner songs you could get away with the kids. That was always fun. All right, so I'm mispronouncing it. It's the consortium. Am I?
Consortium.
Consortium.
And I could be mispronouncing it.
No. You guys both have said it the same way. I have mispronounced it. The Consortium for Safe Communities. So I really feel like there is a great lack of respect. I feel like there is a lack of, self-respect with people these days. When you go back, people would always go, hey, you see pictures of stadiums in the 1940s, the World Series, and everybody was in suits and dresses, and you just almost held yourself to a higher standard. I get it. Styles change, people change, all that. But there is something about in our society where we really have lost a lot of respect. I mean, we can go on and see anything from anywhere. We watch people melt down. We watch people throwing food back at people at fast food. You see it all. It is a level of disrespect for humanity that I've never seen. Now, we could say it's always gone on and we just never saw it, but I don't believe that. And I don't know if sometimes it's the copycat theory of, where somebody's doing this, so therefore I'm going to do it as well, or I want the attention, or, hey, this is the cool thing to do online. I'm not sure. You saw it with something that I thought was horrific and came up on the podcast just the other night, the knockout game, where people would just walk down the street and knock somebody out. And I would always say, I've instructed boxing for many years. It's not so much the punch as it is the fall. Right? The fall is what can really screw you up. I mean, Doc, you could probably speak to that. It's, I've known people who have gone out to answer the phone, slipped off a curb and hit their head and wound up in rehab with brain swelling and all kinds of things. It's the fall that does it. A lot of times if you have an elderly parent or grandparent, you worry about them. The fall is sometimes worse than whatever made them fall. Whatever, they may have had a momentary heart thing that made them okay. We can figure that out, but the fall, man, they knock their noggin around. That's the bad stuff.
And you said it yourself: if a boxer's hitting a boxer, you have defensive moves.
Yes,
it's coming.
Right.
You're not some person walking down the street randomly getting smacked in the
defenseless. Just that stuff is crazy. But one of the things that I really was very puzzled by, and I was more puzzled because, again, I was really hoping that the idea just had a bad title, and that was defund the police. And I thought, could you rename it to something like reallocate? If you feel like there is not a communication, enough communication or enough, I don't know what, but between the citizens and the police force, then why aren't we building that up? There used to be youth leagues that the police would be coaches in and different things. I think John Wallace, who went on to be a star for the New York Knicks, certainly a Syracuse star, had started out in the police leagues. Those budgets, obviously, things change and we have to make choices, and those budgets were cut. But now all of a sudden we're talking about, well, we want to reallocate. Well, what are you doing in place of this? Then, I mean, in the city of Rochester, and this will get a little political, and I apologize, but now you're going to put people in charge of basically disciplining the police, the accountability board for people who've never done any kind of law enforcement. And I feel like all of that sends a message of you're the enemy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so frank about it, but it really feels like at times that's become the enemy.
Well, just before Mike jumps in, because I know he has an opinion on this. So I told you earlier, we do a lot with something called Project Exile.
Yes.
And one of the things that Project Exile does is they're in the community in the summer, right? So they pick neighborhoods and they do a lot of work through what's called TIPS. And maybe you've heard about that.
Yes.
The programs where they set up in neighborhoods and they do a lot of work and they talk to a lot of neighborhood folks. And what's interesting to me, the RIT Criminal Justice School does kind of an analysis of the questions that are asked in the neighborhood. And the folks in the neighborhood do not disrespect the police.
No.
When you go and you talk to people at their door, they need the police, they want the police, they respect the police.
Yeah.
So I don't know what voice is out there being portrayed as the majority, but when you talk to citizens, especially people who live in these high-risk neighborhoods, they want support. They want the police. They want to know who their officers are. They want those people to be part of their community, and they want to support them.
Boy, I believe that. I believe that so much, but I do wonder then, is there also a fear in those communities to be the one to turn to the police?
Well, so I think one of the benefits of the way that the thing is set up in the summer is people come to your door and they're talking to your door. So you're not calling the police. There's not a police car parked in front of your house.
Right.
But you have an opportunity to interact with the police. And I think it's a very positive message that the neighborhoods that you would think would be the least likely to trust the police, when you talk to people who live there is actually significant trust. I think you're not hearing that. So I don't know what you were going to say, but I was surprised by that. And I've looked at the reports that were generated by RIT, because the criminal justice students go through and look at the work that's done there. And I thought that was actually very surprising, because these are areas where I would initially have thought exactly what you said. But when you talk to people who live there, they want safety. They want their kid to be able to go to school or go to the store without being threatened, and they're having trouble making that happen. And that's like in the city, maybe not as much in the county, but certainly, I think.
Well, that seems to be where you're seeing most of the people that are coming to need your services and your skills.
Well, so for us, it's a little different, because we're a regional trauma center, so we have 17, 18 counties that send patients to us.
Okay.
So the shootings and stabbings come predominantly from the larger city areas, but we definitely, you get some stuff around the borders. We get a lot of car accidents, and some of those cars are stolen cars.
Yeah.
So those things have a little less boundaries associated with them. But what I was surprised at, having looked at this issue, was there is a baseline level of support, and it's not talked about. For whatever reason, the public, what you're hearing in the news,
the loudest voice,
loudest voices are anti-police, defund the police, and don't trust your local police officer. But I think they're, you interact with people all the time, and I don't think you get that sense from the general population.
No, I certainly do not.
I want to so badly right now play for you guys Bill Burr, the comedian, talking about, and I don't know if anybody saw this, but he talked about Black Lives Matter and how white suburban women, as he says, swung their Gucci-footed boot over onto that. And I don't mean this in any disingenuous way. I'm just saying what the doctor so eloquently just put forth is the communities themselves that have the biggest problems want the police. The voices we are hearing are people who are not living in those communities saying defund the police. But that's a problem.
And I'll say this, and this would be the only thing I would say in defense of somebody. I don't think that just because you don't live in a community that precludes you from having an opinion on the way law enforcement activities are conducted in a location. So I'll give them that much.
Okay.
However, when you do live in a community, when you do live in a community, well, I work in the city of Rochester. I don't live there.
Yes.
But I spend 8-10 hours a day in the city of Rochester.
Right.
I walk the streets in the city of Rochester. So I feel like I have some valid input. But where I was going was at exactly what the doctor said. I have a pretty good amount of interaction with people from different neighborhood groups and associations and victims of crime from all around the county of Monroe, to include the city of Rochester. I've never had anybody tell me, I wish you guys would get out of my neighborhood. It doesn't happen often. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but I've never heard it. And I think that what the doctor said earlier, you've got some loud voices, offering input. I don't know what the motivating factor behind it is. Maybe it's because they truly believe what they're saying. But maybe it's because right now it's a thing that's trending online. And here is a massive marketing campaign created under the guise of equal justice for all. But what they don't realize is by taking police out of neighborhoods, you're creating that inequality because the police are there to provide a service and keep people safe. Right. And when you start removing that service and neighborhoods become more dangerous, I got my graphs over here, that just creates inequities and injustices.
So as you're walking the streets of Rochester and maybe other in the community in Monroe County, what is the answer? What is needed there where we talk about, let's say, money being put forth in certain areas? Money is thrown at things all the time, right? I mean, we could look at one of the biggest ones would be urban school districts, not just the city of Rochester, anywhere, let's say New York State, or trying all these different things that it's like anything against the wall that doesn't stick. But it sounds like this plan that you guys are putting together has some kind of real, hey, here's something we believe will work. We've seen it work here, or we've seen it work there. We've talked to other communities. What are some of these things?
So about a year and a half ago, I did a research project for Sheriff Baxter. We had a very, well, I shouldn't say it's very small, but we had another group, and he told me I'm fired from making decisions on names of groups, because this one was called the Coalition for Community Safety.
Okay.
But this group was much different. We stepped out of our comfort zone a little bit, and we got with some folks, actually from some state lawmakers' offices and their staff, and we drafted a white paper on sort of a social oriented program that we thought could help some families in need, going back to what you said earlier about some of these kids that needed a father or a mother to wrap their arm around them. So we got with this group and sort of created a proposal that we could get behind as it relates to coming up from that end and the prevention side. The sheriff says it all the time: prevention, enforcement, recovery. I said it twice, not because it was a mistake. That is the most important part of the solution.
Right.
So there's a reason we say it twice. But it also goes back to another old adage: the best time to plant the tree is 15 years ago.
Right.
So the prevention efforts that we're starting on right now, we're going to realize in 10 years. We're going to realize them in 15 years when these become excellent people, going on to do great things in their communities and their spheres of influence. But the thing is that we're seeing we can do both of those things. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Bill Bratton, the old New York City police commissioner, said one time, and I always mess this up, so I'm going to ask you to edit me if I really mess it up. But public safety and fair treatment under the law are not mutually exclusive items, and they can be achieved simultaneously. And we wholeheartedly believe that in this group. So yes, let's do all of those things to help these kids at home, to help single mothers, poverty, all of those things. Right. Yes, we want to see those efforts made. And this white paper included an appendix that I think was about 18 pages long of just resources in Rochester, New York. We are incredibly rich with resources in the greater Rochester area.
I agree.
So let's keep doing those things, and more importantly, let's hone in on the ones that work and apply, like you said, funding to the ones that work.
Well, there were some great things. I remember a Reverend, and I'm forgetting his name, but it was I Can Read was the program.
It was Bishop David Singleton.
David, yes.
He's a great man.
Yes.
Officer firefighter.
Okay, and I remember having him on the radio, and people would do it, and it was just a great way to go and give a little extra help to young people, first, second grade, maybe kindergarten, and giving them a chance to read and helping them learn to read, and how important that is. And maybe in some of the suburbs, I'll just tell you, in terms of that, you go to the city of Rochester, right, and we look at one of the poorest school districts in the country. And then you go 15 minutes in the other direction, and you've got Pittsford, who for many, 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 many years, only until recently, my kids went through this, it was half-day kindergarten. They didn't offer full-day kindergarten. And the reason was the kids were getting read to at home. They were learning there was just more input. Now, look, there's a lot going on. Poverty brings all kinds of problems. But if we want to solve this, and if we really believe that we can help, and the consortium believes that's part of it, is getting in there and helping. Education is a key thing. And boy, this was something I always hold so big. Is we talk about self-esteem and self-esteem. Get a kid to win, you can push them even further. The best coaches were the ones that yelled at you when you won, screamed about all the mistakes you made. You could handle it because you won. Felt great. They were a little more compassionate when you lost because they could. But it's that kind of thing. It's almost like you just need some coaches along the way. And, boy, you can change things quickly. And when somebody feels good about themselves, they can run through walls. Anybody, I don't care who they are or where they came from, they start feeling good about themselves, they can do really, really great things. And I think that there's a cycle of all kinds of things. It comes into depression and all of it, right? Because I feel like there's no win, there's no way out. The world sucks. I can't get anywhere. But, boy, if we start, going in and just those programs like I Can Read were really wonderful things that had just were grassroots. I mean, we talk about grassroots. I don't think there was any real funding with that. I think it was just simply like, you got a book at home that your kids aren't reading anymore, bring it in, and we've got a first grader who would love to try.
Yeah, and in that particular program, what the bishop did was he was getting peers to come into the schools.
Yeah.
And he'll link them up with one kid. That was your peer for the school year. And all he asked for is an hour a week. You go into the school, you team up with a kid, and he told a great story about the former Rochester City fire chief. I think it was John Caulfield. Actually got a nonverbal kid with autism.
Okay.
To by the end of year 2, he wouldn't give up on the kid. He got him to read out
wow.
loud. Yeah. So you hear those stories, and I get as encouraged as I can see that you are, and those are just incredibly powerful stories. Those prevention efforts are so important. And this group, has not lost sight of that. We want those people to do that work.
Yeah.
And we will stand with them whenever they need us, and we'll support those efforts 100%.
I've always believed that no matter what in life, if you wanted to do something, that people would meet you halfway. If there's somebody in one of these communities, as the doctor was talking about, who really wants to make a difference and is just looking for help, hey, how do I fix my street, my block? People will meet you halfway. I mean, there's a bunch of people who want to see a better life for everybody. That's what we're talking about. A better life.
So one of the things that strikes me as interesting is we really do have a lot of resources in this community, and even in when you look at the state budget, a lot of money is allocated to this problem. So what I like to, you can make fun of me for the medical side of this, but I have kind of an analogy that when I talk about this, that I try to push a little bit. And I look at the issue with crime similar to like a wound that's not healing.
Yeah.
So, most people are familiar with what a wound looks like, especially one that's not healing. And the way you get a wound to heal, number one, is you cut the dead stuff off, right? And then once that stuff is off, then you apply, we're living in a modern age. There's a lot of new medications and potions and things like that that you can put on that wound to help the healthy tissue heal. So, similar to what the consortium's trying to do, like you pick the most dangerous elements in your community, they just got to go. You cannot keep them out and about. And then you take all the resources, the money, all of the other programs, and you apply them to where you think they're going to do the most good to try and heal what's left. And it's a little bit of an analogy that maybe doesn't necessarily land all the time, but but there's a lot of people who really care about this, and money is being expended here. But I think the truly hardened criminals are not going to stop doing what they're doing.
Right. And so there's your problem. There's
and they're going to stay in the community
tissues,
causing mischief. Yeah. So on a wound, you want to take that stuff off.
Right.
And then you apply all these things to what's left. Because you really want a healthy community, you want a healthy tissue, you want to be able to heal. So I think that's not different from kind of the overall concept of looking at things like a dangerousness standards. Doesn't mean everybody has to be, to the fullest extent of the law, but the ones who are truly out there causing real mischief, and it's the minority of people. It's absolutely not a big number, but it's, those people are running loose all the time.
What's the old adage? It's a simple one. One bad apple spoils the bunch, so to speak, right? I mean, it's sort of what you're saying to this. So is this falling on deaf ears? And by that I mean with the leaders, is the resistance? You mentioned pushback before a little bit. I mean, do they need to come and hear people get up and talk, almost like some kind of a board meeting where people come up and say, "Hey, this is what's happening in my community, and we need your help."
and we've had those meetings.
Yeah.
Like I said, this group began in October of 22. And we met with several different members of the Rochester majority delegation, and they've heard us. They've heard, they've heard our proposal for the ability to detain people that are dangerous, people that are repeat offenders, and of course, what we currently have is the risk of flight. There have been meetings not only with the consortium. I know Sheriff Baxter has met with just about each and every one of them individually. We see no action. Some of the reason that we are offered is that majority of policymaking decisions are done downstate.
Yeah.
That's where the power exists within the legislature, and that's we understand that. But what we're looking for to occur here is our representation in this area needs to hear what their community and their constituents are asking for.
Right.
And we believe we offer a good representation of that. I did a quick poll before I came here, and this letter, when we sent it off to this list of New York State legislative representatives, along with the governor and a couple members of her cabinet, I think it had about 1,800 signatures on it when we sent it. We continue to keep the opportunity for people to sign on in support of those initiatives. I think we're around 2,300 signatures on it right now, and we intend to keep it wide open with no end in sight.
What's that website again?
Yeah, that website is ourconsortiumny.com.
Okay.
O-U-R, ourconsortiumny.com. So
make it simple. That's I'm teasing.
I lost the argument.
I'm teasing.
Yeah. Well, but I would argue that this effort, what we're talking about here, is an upstate New York effort.
Yes.
The issues are the same downstate.
Sure they are.
So when you say that the power brokers are downstate, if they talk to their constituents, they're not going to hear a different story. It'd be very interesting. You ask somebody, let's have a press conference, find me 10 people that you think are safer now than they were 5 years ago. Let's put them up here and ask them some questions. Good luck finding 10 people that live in these neighborhoods that are feeling safer, feeling less likely that their car is going to get stolen, that their kid's going to get molested on the way to the, interfered with on their way to school or shopping or something like that. So I think what we're doing here is we're laying some railroad tracks for other people to follow, but I think the problems are not unique to Rochester or Utica or Elmira.
And just to piggyback off what the doc said, we absolutely are laying those railroad tracks. So on January 30, a contingency from this group, the Consortium for Safe Communities, we're heading out to Buffalo, New York, to meet with a very powerful group out there to essentially give them the blueprint. And we're taking this regional. So Buffalo efforts begin the end of this month. And there will be a couple folks there from the Onondaga County area at that meeting as well, and then we will start shifting east down the thruway with intentions to take it downstate eventually as well.
Yeah, in Albany at least.
So how do you change? How do you affect improvement? The first step is organization. You have to be organized about it, and that's that's what we've spent the last little over a year doing, is essentially building out an organization here, people that, share the same concerns, and it's very easy to find those people, quite frankly, because everybody in our communities are concerned.
How frustrating has it been to try to get this? You see it.
Well, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Mike's good at correcting me, but I think it's actually been encouraging.
Okay.
I mean, I think the political side has been extremely frustrating because there's some pretty common sense stuff here, but to find such a cross section of the population truly thinking that this is the right thing.
Yep.
And one of the things Mike really didn't talk about was the fact that this consortium has very few uniforms. Because one of the initial criticisms was that, law enforcement's not supportive of this. So I think the sheriff was very attuned to that. So this is not a group of cops saying we don't like this. This is a group of citizens. These are people who are directly impacted by these policies, who are, the police, the sheriff and his team is providing some organization to the structure, but the voices are not. These are people who are living in these areas under these conditions, and they feel this is the right thing. So I think from that point of view, it's encouraging. Like, this is not just, Mike Zamara and Todd Baxter out there talking about stuff. This is, if you get 30 people in the room, they're going to agree on most of these things. You get 50 people in the room, they're going to agree on most of these things, no matter what political background, no matter what racial background, no matter what neighborhood they're from. So I think that part has been encouraging.
Well,
now it's a matter of getting people to hear it.
Yeah, right. You can't have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness when you feel like you can't even leave your house in a safe manner, right? There was, where the studio is right across from the Fairport Police Department. And a friend of yours, Chief Baxter, Chief Barnes, had come over, and we were doing a podcast for Fairport, and he had victims of a crime in here. They are an older couple who lives in the village who had their truck stolen out of their driveway and found in the city, right? All banged up and then all the expense that then is laid at their feet, all that frustration, all that, and just the feeling of someone else when they get the truck back and it's all worked on had been in it, and all that unsafe feeling as you're talking about. You're right. I think if you go around, you're going to find most people would think that this is a overdue. Is it over?
Yeah, and those people didn't ask to be put in that position.
No, they didn't.
They didn't ask for they're minding their business, presumably. I don't know these people, but we had something similar. We had a woman, her first name was Barb, and I can't think of her last name. Similar thing. She, out in Chilai Gardens, had her vehicle stolen. Barb had just retired. Yeah. Barb had retired like 6 months prior to that. The only thing she was focused on was golfing, and all of a sudden, she comes out and her car is gone. She had to come out of retirement, go back to driving school buses to finance a new vehicle.
Right.
That's not right.
No.
It's not right. No. She was I just got the final numbers in. There were 4,511 stolen vehicles in the county of Monroe last year. That's 4,511 victims.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is.
That's a lot of people that did not ask to be put into involved in the criminal justice system. And more importantly, these are the first people that are forgotten about when justice begins to occur.
Yeah, I would also guess that that's not 4,000 individual criminals going out and stealing one car.
Oh, absolutely
right?
not.
So this gets right back to what you were talking about, right? Somebody has to, this has to be controlled, right? Somebody has to do this. And I think no matter what your political affiliations or beliefs, at the base, this is common sense, right? I mean, no matter where you are on the spectrum, you don't want your car stolen while you're inside arguing about it. Right?
No.
Or anything else. Like, not, I'm using car theft as an example, but I mean, the retail theft that we're seeing around here, I mean, this is it's gonna change prices. It's already changing prices. It's gonna chase stores away, right? Those are things that directly impact the community. And if you're a smaller store, you can't keep sustaining that kind of theft.
So, you bring up retail theft. Here's what our proposal just is not looking to achieve. We're not looking to lock up the kid that goes into the Home Depot and steals $50 worth of stuff. He's never been arrested before. Nobody's looking to lock this kid up in jail.
He's trying to build a tree fort.
But what we do want to do is, when the individual coming out of the Home Depot with a shopping cart full of Makita saws,
he's going to sell them,
gets arrested for the fourth time in 2 months for doing that. We can't just continue to give these people pieces of paper, I call them promise papers, to come back to court and just expect they're not going to keep re-engaging in that. So it's everybody uses that old saying that I think it was Albert Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result is insanity.
I think that's a great opening for you guys just recently looked at your appearance tickets, right? Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, 50% of the appearance tickets you give go to people who don't come back to court. You go and chase them. Right? You go and chase them. You find them. You give them yet another appearance ticket because the original crime was just an appearance ticket. So you're kind of chasing your tail. So that we now know, I mean, for whatever reason these laws were changed way back when, we now have a track record to show that a bunch of this stuff just doesn't work, and it's time to tweak these things.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking for, Doc, and that. Simple tweaks. We're not looking to, my boss says it all the time, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not looking to do that. There is some merit to the tenets and the intentions of this legislation that was crafted. We think that people deserve to be treated fairly and that nobody should be locked away for minor crimes while they could be out, providing for their family, going to work, going to school, et cetera, et cetera. But there has to be a level of distinction where we can sit down and reasonably say, this kid needs a timeout, or that guy needs a timeout.
Well, I thought it was Sheriff Baxter told me over the summer that there was one young person, could it be involved in 12 car thefts?
Oh, that's very believable.
I hope I'm not misspeaking, but and not necessarily always the driver, but involved in some way. To what the doc has said, this isn't okay. That's that needs the timeout, or maybe longer, maybe a nice long timeout.
There was we stopped a car. I want to say it was in Penfield somewhere over the summer, and there were 7 kids in there.
Yeah,
and a gun.
Yeah.
When did that become something that we are accepting? And I believe all but one of them were cut loose at 2:00 in the morning. We had to argue with a parent to come down and get their kid. I mean, these things are occurring, and when there isn't an appropriate infrastructure for the kid to go home.
Gotcha.
You know, I could tell you, if I was 16 years old and I was out at 2:00 in the morning in a stolen car, I wouldn't want to go home. I'd rather go to jail. But, the problem is there's no infrastructure to support the kid at home. And what we're asking for isn't to go and lock this kid up in juvie for the next 6 months because he did this. We want to lock him up for a little bit and get him the help he needs. We have all this. I mean, I told you earlier, I have that white paper with 18 pages of resources available to people in this county. Let's put those to work for this kid. And then, recognizing the need for that, the county executive found a little bit of a workaround, and he rolled out what's called the JEDS program for some more rapid intervention. And we're doing the best we can utilizing that, and that's proving to be a pretty good model. But what we need is the ability, no matter what a person's age is, to slow them down, whether it's because they're doing, repeat offenses and stealing large amounts of property from stores, or if it's the 3rd time they've been caught with a gun in the last 8 months. That person's dangerous, and I don't mean a legal gun. I mean a illegal gun. Yeah. If you're carrying an illegal gun around town somewhere, you're dangerous. There's a reason you're carrying that gun.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and usually you're not a great shot.
Well, the doc can speak to that. I mean, Doc had a great line the other day. I meant to text you. He said sometimes the first hurdle is putting the person in the X-ray and IDing which one's the new round and which one was already there.
It's not uncommon that we're taking care of people who have been shot more than once. And then when you're trying to figure out where did this bullet go, you're taking an X-ray to try and figure it out, and you have to sort out, was this bullet here from the last time? And it changes what we do. It changes how we do it. And it's not always, but it happens with some frequency. And it's not just a Rochester problem. It happens in big cities all over the place.
Yeah. But that just shows you that there is, again, a small group that are committing most of the crimes.
Yeah. And I can't say that enough. And I thank you for saying it now. We know who a lot of these people are. And we know there are a lot of people that get arrested and aren't bad people. And in fact, I would venture to say the vast majority of people that become involved with the justice system and sometimes land themselves in jail, they're not bad people. They've made some mistakes, and quite often they go on to correct those mistakes and live highly successful and meaningful lives. But there's a few hundred people in our area of Monroe County that are bad people. Those people, frankly, need to be able to be detained when they go out and exhibit this sort of behavior, like shooting up houses. The other night, I think a house got shot up, and an elderly woman was hit by it's. That didn't happen. Maybe I just didn't watch the news enough when I was younger, but I don't remember those sorts of things occurring.
It didn't.
On a widespread basis in 1995. It didn't.
Which doesn't seem that long ago, which shows how old I am. That's what you say when you're old. Well, that's just yesterday. But it doesn't. I mean, we're not talking all that long ago, but it is a generation, right? So within a generation, we've seen things change drastically and not necessarily for the good. So again, I think, how do people get involved in this to make a difference, lend their voice or at least their signature to try to make some change, to the laws that will directly impact
Yeah.
this. And I think your analogy, as much as you're a doctor nerd, was fantastic. No, I really do. Where you're talking about cutting off and then, making the wound heal. How do we do that? And it is getting rid of the bad stuff, but that would be changing laws. And I think when the majority speaks, that's when things start to change. But you got to get those voices heard.
So that's what we're looking for, Bill. We need some legislative help here. We're not, again, talking about a total rewrite of these laws. We're talking about maintaining these tenets and making some small adjustments to improve public safety. And that is this group's mission in a very short sentence: improvements to public safety. So how do people help? You can start by signing on to our initiatives at ourconsortiumny.com. But also, more than that, if you want to take it a step further, everybody in Monroe County and in this area is represented by 2 levels of state government, and that's your New York State Senator and your New York State Assemblyman. And you can very easily go online and find out who your state representatives are, and you can call their office and tell them, hey, I heard about what they're talking about on the Bill Moran podcast, and I looked into it a little bit, and I think that makes sense, and I'd like you to support that, in your role as an assembly person or senator in Albany. I would like my voice to be heard.
See, to me, that's the frustrating part, is the political aspect of it, especially when you've gone out with Project Exile and have seen the data from those questions asked in the communities that are most affected by this kind of crime or gun violence. Where they want something. So why aren't we making the changes? The resistance to this is, sometimes I feel like things don't change until someone with some power gets affected. Which sounds terrible, and I would never want that to happen. But you know what I'm saying? Like, until you've lived it, sometimes we don't make the change. We live in a bubble, or we think, well, that's just over there, and that's not really the case. And it's one example of a bigger problem, a systemic problem, and that's not. And then all of a sudden something happens, and you think, oh, you get hit by somebody who stole the car. And you find out that kid had been picked up 5 other times for the same kind of crime. Why wasn't that child contained?
And the worst part of it is that kid's 15 and really had an opportunity, had somebody done something sooner, to prevent not only the tragedy you're looking at right now, but the direction this kid is heading in.
Yes.
We're not doing anybody any favors.
No.
So it's just,
where's that kid in 10 years?
I mean, that's kind of the goal. And I think, to bring it back to the consortium, the fact that, you have 30, 40 people around the table, all with different backgrounds, all with completely different ideas, all thinking that we're on the right track here.
Yeah.
We want that 15-year-old not to make that bad decision to begin with.
No, and you want to see that
kid
succeed.
Yes,
be successful. Absolutely.
But once you get in that car and you run over a baby, in a carriage in a corner somewhere in a suburb close to the city, then there's no coming back from that.
No, there's not.
And like Mike said, on the medical side, it's all about prevention, right? Prevention. So this is something that's just the writing's on the wall. You can see these bad things are going to happen. It might not happen today, but there's just no way that these scenarios are going to play out well.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all about.
Is there a way for people who may be listening to actually go to these meetings, become part of the consortium? I don't, or...
So it's a large group.
Yes.
And so...
I'm trying to make it larger.
Short answer is
so
yes.
The meetings never end, right?
Short answer is yes, and we are always looking for more input. We by no means, anybody in this group, nobody thinks they're the smartest person in the room. And if somebody raises their hand and says, "Hey, what do you think about this?" we're all ears, and that's the best thing about this group. We truly believe it's an all-encompassing group, and that we are representatives of just the myriad of folks that live throughout Monroe County and the different positions that they hold. Yes. So if somebody does want to come to a meeting of the Consortium for Safe Communities, you can get in contact with us via that website when you sign on to that letter, and just indicate, that you are interested in that. The beautiful thing about this group, we never meet just to have a meeting either. We don't have quarterly meetings or biweekly or monthly meetings. We meet when we have something to talk about. Lately, we've got a lot to talk about. So we met back in December, and we've got a meeting in Buffalo in January, and we'll be scheduling one for the Rochester group probably in early to mid-February. So, yeah, long answer to your question, absolutely.
Yeah, that people can join. Well, I think this is great. I'm really happy to learn about it, and nice to meet both of you. And I think it's something that the community needs, right? It needs to be heard and needs more. It sounds like this needs more support or more voices behind it, because it seems like a lot of people do agree with it. It's just common sense.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And it's good to get a little bit of validation from folks in all avenues of
and
life.
We very much appreciate the opportunity to come talk about this. And we are speaking for many other people in this group.
Yeah.
So it's not just the two of us. So you sit down with anybody from that group, you're going to get down to the same facts. We might get to them differently because we look at things from a different perspective, but at the core, we all believe the same thing, and we want our communities to be safe. We want our neighboring communities to be safe.
Yes.
And we want this nonsense not to happen.
Right.
And I got to believe the people who represent us should want that also. So can't we get there?
Yeah.
What do we have to do to get there?
Right.
And
we want to make a better community. We want to make a better overall state. We want to, want people to be here, not leave here. And I think that's a big thing. For Dr. Mark Gestring, for Sergeant Zamira, I'm Bill Moran. We'll see you tomorrow.
Woke up in a hotel, didn't know what to do. I turned the TV on, wrote a letter to you. The news was talking about